All right, everyone. Hello and welcome into the Full Court Trap podcast coming at you here on this Monday afternoon. Blake, another loaded weekend in college basketball just got finished. Plenty of headlines across the board, notable performances. Another great week for the sport. Great weekend, excuse me. And we were both on site at different venues and stuff, so we had to do a little bit of catch up, but we've got the gist of most of everything that happened. I was on site at Kentucky versus Arkansas, and Blake, how was the Royal Rumble before we start? I got to hear about that.
It is insane. It was like an out of body experience. Like it's hard to really explain it. I got to see ISO Speed randomly make an entrance. He ended up eliminating someone. Saw Roman Reigns, literally one of the biggest WWE superstars in recent history. So I mean, overall, it was a crazy night. I got a little emotional at one point just because I hadn't seen something like that in over 15 years. So it was definitely like a once in a lifetime type of experience.
Yeah, it was a crazy experience in Rupp Arena too. That's for sure. Even though my Cats lost, that was an insane environment to be a part of. I'm not sure I'll ever see Rupp like that again. But I alluded to it, Blake. We had to do a little bit of catch up where we were both busy this weekend, but we've got all of our notes and highlights watched of everything that happened in college basketball this weekend. So that'll lead perfectly into our trap takeaways for the weekend, the new segment we rolled out last week. Blake, I think I have a clue of where you might be going with this because it seems to be the consensus storyline across all of college basketball. So the floor is yours. Present your trap takeaway for the past weekend.
Oh, it's actually going to be the game you were at, Kentucky at Arkansas, or Arkansas at Kentucky. My bad. John Calipari returned to his old home for over a decade. Ended up putting belt to ass against Kentucky, 89-79. And this is a game where Arkansas really controlled the pace and tempo of the game, like from tip off to finish. So overall, a great win for them. There's some takeaways that I had from this game. So Arkansas, literally every guy in that starting lineup that needed to succeed so the team could win ended up performing well. This included Big Z, John L. Davis, who had one of his biggest games in an Arkansas jersey. Carter Knox had a really outstanding game overall on both sides of the floor. I thought he chipped in some really good minutes for them. DJ Wagner, another guy that had a really good performance. And this is a guy that battled injuries last year. Uh, he's kind of been really inconsistent so far at Arkansas now in the second year of college. But this is a big step forward for a guy who really hasn't been comfortable. And then another guy that I thought had a really good game was well, I talked about it, John L. Davis. Um, this is a guy that looked like the vintage Davis, like we saw at FAU under Dusty May. He just looks a lot more comfortable now compared to what he had like from the start of the season to like mid late January. And he's starting to look like an old self. He's scoring efficiently, like 8 of 16 from the field. Adu Thiero is another guy as well that just continues to put up big numbers for Arkansas. He looks like a solidified top or first round pick in next year's draft. I mean, the kid is just a freak athlete. Like he's stronger than heck. Just gets downhill really well. Gets to the line efficiently, and yeah, this team just looks a lot different right now. And then their starting front court as well combined for 45 points. Their starting back court combined for 35 points. So that's over. I think I'm not a mathematician, but I believe that's over 90% of their points for the night. So it's unreal what they were doing. Billy Richmond, Trevon Brazil, really good minutes. They get a big thumbs up. Billy Richmond had a crazy dunk in the early first half of that game. Trevon Brazil, I think he had 4 points on the night. He wasn't doing a ton on the offensive end, but he was getting his guys open. Uh, he's really, really tough on defense. And then to switch the narrative here and talk about Kentucky. This is a team that I had really high hopes for. I still kind of do, but it's starting to decrease day by day, especially with guys like Kirk Risa and Lamont Butler being out right now. And their defense, like top to bottom in that team, it just flat out sucks, to be honest with you, Luke.
Mhm.
They can't seem like they can stay in front of a guy on the perimeter or driving. Like, it just looks bad for them. Uh, I get Mark Pope as an offense first guy, but this defense needs some big time help, or that there's a chance they could be a first round exit type of team. I'm not saying it's happening. Big Blue Nation, don't get mad. I'm just saying this defense is that bad right now. And then Andrew Carr as well. He doesn't look the same as he had before. You can tell he's not 100% yet. I mean, he made a three, but besides that, he wasn't really doing a lot of beneficial things for the Cats on the night. And last but not least, Amari Williams, him like the offense running through him and him being the like primary operator for that team. It's really not a recipe for success, to be honest with you. Obviously, this is coming at the hand or the card of Lamont Butler and Kirk Risa being out right now, which was like two of their biggest primary ball handlers. But it's still absurd that they have to have Amari Williams be the guy that the offense runs through because guys like Travis Perry, Colin Chandler, they're just not ready for it. They're not ready for the big time games yet.
Yeah, no, and a guy you also didn't mention for Kentucky that was pretty frustrating, Kobe Brea. I mean, only 5 points on the day. You're considered to be the best shooter in the country, and you go out there and put up a stinker. And then on top of that, you add in the fact that you just can't guard whatsoever. Like, I hate to dunk on the kid, but Kobe Brea cannot play defense whatsoever. He's a liability when he's on the floor, and if he's not scoring, like in this game, that's going to bite you in the you know what. And then you
Yeah.
got guys like Colin Chandler and Travis Perry trying to step in and fill that kind of backup role for Kirk Risa and now Lamont Butler as well, where he's been out and we don't know when exactly he's coming back yet. So there's definitely a lot of concerns for this Kentucky team, I guess. If you want to spin this into something that there's no sugarcoating this. This is a bad loss for Kentucky. You have your old coach come into your building with an underwhelming team thus far and he pretty much stuffs you in a locker. And I mean, that's just not a good look. But if you do want to spin it, it was an incomplete team because I mean, Lamont Butler not playing, Andrew Carr was a non-factor. You mentioned he doesn't look like himself yet, so it may not be time to hit the panic button yet on this Kentucky team, Blake. But
But your hand
I'm
should be
definitely,
like
yeah,
right above it because I
yeah.
mean it's time after time, game after game that this defense looks lost at times. Well, not at times, like all the time.
Hmm.
Against Florida, Florida's a really good team, but I mean when they let them come into Rupp and barely hang on and allow over 100 points, which I mean, hey, they scored 100 as well, but if you're letting a college team score over 100 points on you, that you're not a good defensive team. Like you got problems. So I mean, this defense definitely needs to start picking it up. If they can replicate what they did against A&M, which was what 2-3 weeks ago. I mean, they
Hmm.
actually showed some potential on the defensive end. They looked tough. They were well, what else were they? Oh, they were like walling up, so like the offense guy couldn't score on them. And then just against Arkansas, they just look lost at times, just letting guys wide open, not even close to the ball. Like it's just a piss poor showing for them.
Yeah, and another one to give flowers to on the Arkansas side that you didn't mention, Zvonimir Ivisic. I mean, he stepped into that building and
Yeah, I
he
don't know
hit
half about
three.
Big Z on my notes.
Yeah, he hit three after three. They were abusing that pick and pop on Kentucky all night long, and they just couldn't handle it. Ansley Almanor wasn't making rotations, and he got hot, and that was definitely a added factor to their success. I mean, he did kind of get taken advantage of on the defensive end with Amari Williams, but like you said, if Amari Williams is the primary option, then Kentucky's just destined for failure. It doesn't matter who they
Yeah.
play.
Yep, definitely. And talk a little more about Big Z. I mean, this is a guy that had so much hype last year as a freshman. They had fans. I think it was the Rep to No Good podcast that were making signs
Made the
like
billboard.
billboard signs, yeah, saying hashtag free Big Z. And this is a guy that had like lottery type of talk preseason just because of how like unique his build is. And then you add in his athleticism and his just overall ability to score at like as a guy at 7'3", 7'2" ish, whatever it was. Like he just moves like a unicorn almost, is what I would put it as. Uh, and to see him finally be able to uh like stamp his name as like a good player at Arkansas. It's good to see, and it's even better to see him do it at Arkansas, at a play or at Kentucky, at a place that booed him pregame, booed his coach, booed his teammates that were at Kentucky with him. Like, I mean, that's a big time performance for him.
Yeah, for Arkansas as well, this is a win that you really had to get. Now, the only problem is they are in a pretty steep hole right now. They still only have two conference wins. They're sitting at 12-8, I believe, as a total record. And they also still have Alabama, Texas A&M, Auburn, Missouri, and Mississippi State left to play. So this league, it's not forgiving whatsoever. Do we think that there's enough time for Arkansas to get this thing going, or is they just dug themselves too much of a hole with all of the bad starts they had in the last couple of games?
I'm kind of on the middle. I'm on the middle of it right now. My bad. I mean, Texas, that's a very winnable game. At home against Alabama could potentially be a winnable game if they play like how they did against Kentucky. LSU is definitely a winnable game. A&M and at Auburn, both those games are away. If they somehow win one of those games, and then you add in a couple of those games before, like this is a team that definitely could potentially make a push for the tournament. But I really do think it's going to have to start with these next couple games against Texas, Bama, and then LSU.
Yeah, the only thing that I worry about with Arkansas is obviously, they dug themselves a hole. They sit at 13-8, excuse me, I said 12-8. They've dug themselves a hole here. They've still got a lot of tough opponents left to play. And this, granted, it was a very encouraging game. And Blake, me and you talked about this a little bit pre-pod. But you almost have to wonder, too, like in this scenario with the unique circumstances, your coach is coming back to the palace that he had there in Lexington for a decade plus, and you've got the players that played there, they've got a little extra juice. I just kind of wonder if this performance had a lot of like just momentum and hype put into it that made them kind of play over their heads and want to go out there and win for their coach. And that's not to take anything away from them because they played phenomenal. They deserved to win the game. We talked about it. If Arkansas wanted to win, they needed DJ Wagner to play like he did. They needed John L. Davis and the supporting cast to be that solid. So, do we think that this game is kind of telling of where this Arkansas season could head, or will we look back on this in a couple of weeks and be like, man, that was a crazy, kind of like one off. They were super wrapped up into the environment and the hype of the matchup, and they got one under their belt for their guy. Because I think that is something worth discussing when it comes to this game and this team as a whole.
Uh, Probably more like a. I want to say it's more on Kentucky. I know that's not one of the two options there, but this is
Yeah.
definitely more so telling of how bad Kentucky's defense is right now. Like, and it's just asinine to see them letting Arkansas, who's like a bottom two SEC team right now, and letting them shoot 52% from the field on, I think it was like 25 attempts. And then you got them shooting 55% from the field as well. So when you're getting like a team that, let's put it point blank, sucks right now or has sucked up until this game, well, up until the past couple games before Kentucky, like they weren't a good team at all. They weren't shooting well at all. I think they were shooting like 28% from the three this season, something like that. And for them to come out and shoot crazy, like nuclear numbers against Kentucky at Rupp, it's really more telling about how bad Kentucky's defense is right now, I feel like.
I'm kind of 50-50 on it. Like I've been saying for weeks now, Kentucky's defense stinks, and I'm not moving off that whatsoever. But when you just factor in like all the things that surrounded this game as well, I think there's definitely an argument for, they were super motivated to go in there and win, and they had a career games for some of those guys like DJ Wagner, but really only time's going to be able to tell. I mean, where we sit right now, we can't forecast if this is going to be a fluke game or if this is the start of the revival for Arkansas. But regardless, that was a very good takeaway for the weekend. Obviously, that's probably the consensus out of everything that happened, and you got to give kudos to Arkansas. They went into a raucous environment. I was there. I can speak for it firsthand. That was the loudest I've ever heard Rupp Arena. 40 minutes to tip, everybody standing up on their feet, just waiting for Arkansas to walk into that building. And they walked into that hostile environment and they responded about as well as they have all year in any game. And you got to give them credit because they came ready to play. Cal, you could tell that he definitely wanted them to get that one, and he had his guys understand the magnitude of that assignment. But for my takeaway, I'm not going to go out and copy you, Blake, because we got to get some variety here on the podcast. I'm going to say that obviously John Calipari's return stole much of the spotlight, and it definitely was the biggest takeaway of the weekend. But short behind that, we got to talk about UConn's redemption and Dan Hurley. They went into Marquette and they won 77-69 in a game where most of America picked against them. The whole College Game Day panel, clean sweep of Marquette. Dan Hurley let his thoughts be known on Twitter post game, as he so frequently does. He was ready to talk his stuff, and he deserves it because that was a big night. Solo ball, he had 25 points, 7 for 9 from shooting and on threes. Talk about a hell of a performance there. And this one was big because if you're UConn and you want to scrap your way back into the top tier of the Big East right now with St. John's and Marquette, obviously, they did a great job here to put themselves back in position. Alex Caravan and Samson Johnson, they were very solid as well. And Cam Jones for Marquette, he had a great game. So did Chase Ross and David Joplin, but just wasn't enough. UConn really controlled this game, and I think it was encouraging to see him do it without Liam McNeely too, because he's still suffering that high ankle sprain. Not really sure when exactly he'll be back. If the timetable holds up, we'd probably be seeing him here in the next week or two, possibly. We'll see how that continues to evolve. But Blake, for a team like UConn that was getting kind of buried by the national media here, and people were starting to think that the torch in the Big East had been passed on to the likes of Marquette and St. John's, I think this was a big time statement for Dan Hurley to say that his group's not done yet.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like this UConn team is just so like hot cold almost. Like the game before this, they were struggling against DePaul at home, and then they also lost to Xavier. They really struggled with Butler. They lost to Creighton. They struggled with Georgetown. They struggled against Villanova. So all these games before this DePaul game, they either were struggling and won, or they just flat out lost. So for them to go on the road against a really really tough Marquette team who has like Final Four potential, it's really aspiring to see because they're without one of the best freshmen in college basketball right now, Liam McNeely. There's still no timetable on when he's going to return. It should be soon, from what Hurley said early last month, but uh, without him and having solo ball, Samson Johnson, Caravan, Diarra, Jalen Stewart, all those guys on the starting lineup putting in good minutes, and then you add in Harris Reed as well. He only had 13 minutes of game time, but he had 6 points on the night. So I mean, for them to win this game against a really good Marquette team is really really inspiring.
9 straight games over top 10 opponents for UConn and Dan Hurley now, where they've come out on top. And man, this was definitely one they needed bad to get them back in the picture for the Big East and really beyond. Because I mean, people were starting to kind of count them out of the picture completely. They sat at 25 in the last poll. Now they climb up to 19 after that one. They have a game at the end of the week that we're going to talk about here soon against St. John's, which figures to be a huge matchup, especially when you combine the fact that St. John's and Marquette are actually going to play tomorrow as well. This is a really big week for Big East basketball. It's going to be a pivotal week, and UConn, they needed to get that one there, and that definitely was something that you like to see from a group that's been struggling. And when Liam McNeely gets back in the fold, I think we could definitely start to see the true capabilities of this UConn team start to reemerge. And with the way things are trending, when it comes to like a seed line in the NCAA tournament, they may not end up very high. Like I think at the moment, if you had to guess, they'll probably be around that 5 or 6 line. And I know one thing: if I'm a 4 or 3 seed, seeing Dan Hurley's squad coming there, in the second round, that would be terrifying to me because Dan Hurley, he has not lost a game in March in quite some time now. So no matter what you feel about how this team is as a whole, you can't be counting them out until the clock hits zero in a tournament game because they haven't lost one of those in a while. But huge week for Dan Hurley. Huge week for John Calipari, the two of the biggest icons in the sport. Shout out to them. Some more small notes before we move on and talk about the week. UNC continues to head towards the bottom of the barrel in college basketball. Duke just absolutely blitzed them. Speaking of teams that got absolutely blitzed, Blake, Iowa State getting destroyed by Kansas State. That was not on my bingo card heading into the weekend whatsoever.
Yeah, I didn't expect that at all. And to lose to Kansas State, who really, really is degressed from when they're really good in the past couple years, or really solid, I should say, is really not good to see for this Iowa State team who also lost to Arizona, who I mean they're improving and they're ranked top 25 early in the season, but this is a team that's really struggled to start out. Uh,
Yeah.
and I mean they were getting owned all night by Doug McDaniel, who's like 5'9", 5'11", I should say. He had 20 points on 8 of 17 from the field. And that's not really like unknown to like Kansas State fans. They just had uh what was his name? A short point guard they had in March.
Oh,
Blanking.
crap. I'm blanking on his name. Miles Powell? Or wait, no, no, no. Marquise Noel.
Oh yeah, Marquise
Yep.
Noel.
Yep.
I mean, they're familiar with short guards balling, so that's good to see Doug McDaniel have a great night. Their entire starting lineup really dominated. I felt like David Nagason had 10 points, 8 boards, 3 blocks, and 2 steals on the night. Coleman Hawkins finally decided to blow it up from the field. 5 of 10 from the field, 3 of 3 from three, 17 points on the night, 4 steals, and 3 assists. Then you got Brendan Housen had 15 on the night with 2 made threes, 4 boards, and 3 steals. So this really wasn't just offensive game for Kansas State. It was both sides of the floor. Like they had a handful of steals on the night, a lot more than like you would think an average college basketball team would have. So that was a really good showing for Kansas State. I don't know if they're going to make much noise in the Big 12 tournament, but I mean, I guess we could see a lot of crazy things happen around this time of the year.
That is true. And elsewhere in college basketball, Auburn, they got a little bit of a road scare with Ole Miss, but they came out on top. We come to expect that with this group. Florida, they got absolutely blitzed against Tennessee by 20 points there, got held to their lowest point total of the season. Texas Tech won an overtime thriller against Houston. Michigan State, they finally took one on the road against USC, lost that one. And then, yeah, Kansas, they blew their lead against Baylor on the road. Another concerning result for that Jayhawks team. Missouri blew out Mississippi State on the road. A lot of action. Louisville, they lost to Georgia Tech on the road. They're going to be falling out of the top 25. And Vanderbilt, man, they got 30 balled by Oklahoma. That's a quick exit from the ranks for Vandy. But it was a loaded weekend for sure. A lot of good games, a lot of blowouts as well, too. But we got a big week ahead, Blake, and it starts tonight. We'll hit on this one briefly because the people are probably going to be watching this video as this game's getting ready to start up or maybe even during the game. Iowa State and Kansas tonight. Who we got between those two? Both reeling off
Uh,
losses.
I think I'm gonna have to have Iowa State prevailing in this one. I think they get the tough road win. I mean, they have had some semi struggles in their past couple games, with that being against Arizona and then now Kansas State. But they're playing a Kansas team that is basically the same thing. Like they've shown some really bad struggles. They've showed some really high highs, but I do think Iowa State prevails in this one. Joshua Jefferson, I continue to say this. He's one of the most underrated bigs in the country. getting him from Iona is a huge pickup for them, and he just dominated. I feel like all season long. He struggled against. I think it was against Arizona. It was either Arizona or Kansas State. I forget right now, but and then also I think Curtis Jones is going to have a big time game as well, probably around the 20-point range, few threes, and I think they end up prevailing in this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to roll with Iowa State as well. The team I've been high on all season long. I'm a little bit kind of, leaning towards Kansas, where it's that home court environment for them, and it's hard to bet against them against Allen Fieldhouse. But they've went down twice this year there, once against West Virginia and once against Houston. So it's not an impossible feat. And if
Yeah.
Iowa State's going to get back on track the way that I think they should, it's got to start there. So give me the Cyclones. I think they get it done. I love that team still, even despite the poor result. But moving on into Tuesday, one of my favorite games of the week that's going to be happening at 6:30 on Fox Sports 1. Marquette versus St. John's, a battle of the top two teams in the Big East. Marquette, they're reeling off that loss against UConn. St. John's, they prevailed in a thriller against Providence. Kadari Richmond had the shot to put them over the top, 68-66. Blake, who do we think comes out on top on this clash of the Titans in the Big East?
This is a tough one. My heart's telling me the Johnnies, but I think I'm gonna go with Marquette here. I really don't see them dropping 2 games in a row, even though St. John's is one of the hottest teams in America. But I just think that Cam Jones and David Joplin are just gonna be too much to overcome.
I'm gonna have to go with the MSG Magic here. The Red Storm and the Johnnies. I
John, you
think.
going with the Johnnies?
Yep, I'm going with Ricky P. They've held the home court down this year. They're 14-0 in home games, and I like that squad. I think this team. I might be having a bold take here, but I think they could be a dark horse for a Final Four spot if they keep things rolling the way they do. Because that team, they're tough, hard nosed. They play physical basketball, and they've got a good offense as well. It really does fit the DNA of a Rick Pitino led squad. They got the guys like Kadari Richmond, Zuby Ejiofor. He's a stud, and I just like this team a lot. They're sitting at 19-3 on the year so far. Definitely for Marquette though, if Cam Jones gets hot, it's going to be hard to top them. So a big piece of this game is going to be they're going to have to keep him in check. They're going to have to chase him off the perimeter and not let him get his looks. And then, even still, you got to worry about David Joplin, excuse me, because he's a competent 3-point shooter as well. He hits about two a game over the course of Big East play. So this is definitely an intriguing matchup overall. These are two great teams, obviously. Both are fighting for the top of the Big East, and I'm going to roll with St. John's in this one. I'm going with Rick Pitino, excuse me, not Richard. He's over at New Mexico. He's got a squad too, though. Donovan North,
Yeah.
man, he's a stud. I could talk about him for a while, but moving on off of the Big East and over to the SEC. It doesn't get any easier for Kentucky. We just talked about them, Blake, after that stumble against Arkansas. Now they got to go to Oxford and play the 25th ranked Rebels. Kentucky coming in at 14 in the new poll. Chris Beard, he's cooking down there. They've got a great squad. Matthew Morrell, Dre Davis, Sean Padula, Malik Dia. We've talked about those guys a lot this year. If I had to guess where we stand today on Monday, don't think Lamont Butler's going to be playing, barring something unforeseen. Really, the injury with him, it's kind of just a mystery at this point. We know it's his shoulder, but we don't know what exactly it is. It's really been kept under wraps by the university. And with Andrew Carr recently, I mean, he's been getting minutes. He's starting to ramp back up, but still, with that back injury he's having, those things get complicated. So he could be held out as well. We don't know yet. Injury reports will come out later. But Blake, does Kentucky get a bounce back win here in a hostile environment, or is it going to be Ole Miss?
Uh, I'm gonna say no, and here's why though. If you're missing Lamont Butler, obviously still Kirk Risa and Andrew Carr is not fully healthy, then that's just asking to lose basically on or at a like super loud environment. You already know it's gonna be insanely loud there. Then you got to add in Sean Padula, Jamin Brakefield, uh, who Malik Dia, Morrell, guys like that. They're all gonna want to come out and beat Kentucky because if I'm not mistaken, I think Kentucky won last year and has won in their past couple matchups, and so I think Kentucky definitely is going to have some issues with the physicality in this one. Kentucky's done all right against like an A&M team that's semi-similar, I guess, to Ole Miss, but I just don't see Kentucky pulling this one off with basically the odds against them in this one.
Yeah, the only thing I will say, I know you mentioned Lamont Butler and Carr not playing, that it's a huge hit, but I mean, they did do it against Tennessee on the road. So if you want to make the case for Kentucky,
Yeah,
you can
I know
point to the.
you can throw that one out, but it's like I don't know. It's hard really to
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying for
because
sure.
Kentucky shot like lights out that night. Tennessee missed like I think it was like 36 wide open shots on the night. Like they lost the game themselves. So
Yeah,
if Ole
they.
Miss can hit at least five more open shots than Tennessee did, then Ole Miss is gonna win. Like
I think, in this game, I'm kind of down on Kentucky, but you know what? I'm going to pick them. And you know why, Blake? Because for whatever reason, this Kentucky team, when there's a team next to them that has a number on their name, they, for whatever reason, find a way to pull it out. If you take the number off Ole Miss right now and they're an unranked squad, I would firmly pick Kentucky to lose this game. But for whatever reason, this team just seems to elevate their level of play. On the road, they've played pretty solid on the road, minus the Georgia and a Vanderbilt game. So I just feel like this is a weird setup where Kentucky, oddly enough, I think they're going to come away with the win. It definitely, Lamont Butler and Andrew Carr not being in the fold right now consistently is hurtful for them. But they did show they can get it done against Tennessee. Obviously, Tennessee did take a lot of shots that were ill-advised in that game and did kind of put themselves out of reach. But I also think that this Ole Miss team, they're not as solid defensively as Tennessee is. So I think that if you're Kentucky, that's a recipe for success. If you want to get back to your high scoring ways and getting that offense rolling again and finding your guys, Kobe Bray is going to have to step up. He had a terrible game, like I mentioned. So got to see him get back on track. Jackson Robinson and Otega Oweh, they've got to be your main guys. If Amari Williams is scoring 20 plus in this game, then Kentucky's going to lose. Like that cannot happen again. He cannot be the primary scoring option for the Cats. But I definitely like this Ole Miss squad and what they've got going there. That Matthew Morrell, Sean Padula, and Dre Davis trio, that's one of the best in the conference. And Malik Dia in the front court to complement it all. He's going to be a problem. Amari Williams is going to have his hands filled. But I think I'll go with Kentucky in this one. Mississippi is favored by 3.5, so we'll see how that pans out. It's going to be an intriguing matchup, though, for sure. And on Tuesday as well, in the Big 12, Baylor, they're coming off the huge win against Kansas. They needed that win desperately. Found themselves in a 22-point hole and found a way to get that one done and win by double digits, which is quite crazy to me. They're taking on Texas Tech. The Red Raiders just came off a huge win against Houston in overtime. I did not see that coming. I love Houston, and they had been cruising through Big 12 play, so it's really kind of crazy that Texas Tech was able to pull that off. But they've got a good squad down there. VJ Edgecombe, I will note, he did have an ankle injury in the Kansas game. I'm not sure how that factors into this one and if he's going to play. I think Scott Drew made a statement on it recently, if I'm remembering correctly. I'd have to look it up. But Blake, who are you taking in this one, Baylor or the Red Raiders?
I'm taking the mighty JT Toppins here. Texas Tech definitely. I favor them in this matchup. Uh, because like they played really really well against good teams all season long. They're only I think they just beat who was it Houston
Mm-hmm.
recently, and that was over the weekend too. Actually, on Saturday when I was out, but that was a big win. They played really close against Texas A&M early in the season. They also just lost recently by one to Iowa State, who is a really good team. So like this is a team that I feel like people are undermining at times. They got some depth on that team. Christian Anderson, he's one of my favorite freshmen in college basketball. He's a dynamic scorer and he does a lot of good things. Elijah Hawkins, he's another really good guard for this team. He's good on the defensive end, perimeter defense. Good playmaker. Darian Williams, he's having a really good season. He's averaging 14, 5, and 4 with one steal a game and shooting 52 or 32% from three. My bad. And then you also add in Chance McMillan, who's also averaging 15 a game, 4 boards, and shooting 45% from three. So this is a really deep team, to be honest with you, and I just they got a lot more promise in that team. I feel like than Baylor.
Yeah, and I did just look up Scott Drew's update as of 4 hours ago on VJ Edgecombe. He said VJ will be back when he can be back because he cares about this team. He wants to win, and his intentions are always pure. So that kind of says that he probably won't be giving it a go tomorrow, if I had to guess. And I think that that's really going to hurt Baylor because he's finally been finding a groove lately. Had some stellar performances as of late. Had 14 and 5 against Kansas before he ultimately had to go out because of that ankle injury. Never got an official word on what exactly the ankle injury is. I would imagine it's a sprain of some sorts. But yeah, with Texas Tech having all this recent momentum, I think they're the clear choice here, especially if VJ's unable to give it a go. That's just a huge hit to what Baylor does overall. Rob Wright's going to have to step up in a big way in this one. And then you got to have Jaden Nunn. He's going to have to step up and perform well. Norchad Omir. There's just a lot of guys that you got to rely on that have been good, but they don't really have that kind of blow you away talent that VJ Edgecombe does. They're more complementary pieces when he does his thing and when Robert Wright does his thing. But Baylor, they've been getting back on the right track, so you got to give them credit there. Getting that win against Kansas, that's huge for what they want to do. But losing VJ Edgecombe, that injury is just as massive as well. So give me JT Toppin and Texas Tech, Chance McMillan. You said I think those guys are going to have themselves a night, and I definitely think that they're going to prove that they're here to stay when it comes towards that top level of college basketball right now. They just cracked the top 15 today after that win this weekend. And speaking of the top level of college basketball, the team that has been at the top of the top all season long, Auburn, coming into this game, hosting Oklahoma tomorrow night. 20-1 for Bruce Pearl's squad. They're the first team to hit 20 wins this season, and they've really been just kind of dominating teams all the way through. I mean, Ole Miss, they gave them a scare, but you never really felt like in that game Ole Miss was going to have enough to really catch Auburn in this one. And when you factor in that Oklahoma's going to have to go into the jungle tomorrow night, Blake, I think this is setting up for a very easy Auburn win.
Yeah, this is gonna be scary for Oklahoma. They've kind of struggled in SEC play. They're 3-5 so far. They did just get a blowout win over a Vandy team who did drop out of the top 25 today. They lost by 30, or they won by 30. My bad, and then they lost the game before that by 7 against A&M at A&M. So uh, this is really a hot, cold, hot team in Oklahoma, and I think they're going to be freezing cold against Auburn, who's just shown to be the best team in college basketball. I don't think you can really debate that. The Duke's right there, like 1B, I guess you could say. But yeah, this Auburn team just has way too much depth, and I feel like Janai Broome gonna have another outstanding performance. I don't think Oklahoma really has anyone to contain him. Yeah, I think Auburn wins pretty handily tomorrow.
I think the only way Oklahoma has a chance in this one is if you get a legacy game out of Jeremiah Fears. He goes crazy on the road, and Jalen Moore, he's another guy that would have to go nuts for them. I just think Auburn's too much to overcome at home. I mean, they're too much to overcome for most teams when they have them on the road. So I just can't really go out here and predict Auburn to lose this one. I will be definitely having an emergency podcast if Auburn were to drop this one because that would make shockwaves throughout the college basketball landscape. And you talked about Oklahoma's win against Vanderbilt. That segues perfectly into the game I want to talk about next. Vandy's going into the swamp. Florida, they just got the brakes beat off them in Tennessee, had one of their worst offensive outings of the year by far. That Tennessee defense continues to prove how stifling it is unless they're playing Kentucky. Kentucky got the highest point total against any team on Tennessee this year last week. I don't think that Vandy's going to go into the swamp and win here, Blake. Just to be blunt, I'll go ahead and get out in front of it. I think they can keep it close though, because Jason Edwards, he's an insane talent, and the pieces around that squad as well. There's definitely a solid cast of guys there, but I'm very discouraged after seeing what Oklahoma did to them, because Oklahoma, to be quite blunt with you here, hasn't really blown anybody away in SEC play.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think uh, Vanderbilt really has anybody to match Florida's toughness in the interior too. Like Chenoweth and Condon, I feel like they're gonna feast all night, and then they're gonna try to probably double team, maybe triple team, I guess, at one point in the paint, and that's gonna open up some shot opportunities from the perimeter. So I just think this is a bad matchup for Vanderbilt going into tomorrow. Jason Edwards, I do think he'll have a good game going against Walter Clayton, but I think Walter Clayton might have a better game. But I guess we'll see. Jason Edwards is one of my favorite college basketball players right now too. He's just a lot of fun to watch. He's proven to be one of the best transfer pickups in all of college basketball, but I just don't think they have enough to overcome the Gators at the Swamp.
I fully expect Florida to have a bounce back performance here. I mean, when they play as badly as they did Saturday, you feel like they're just kind of due to explode. And I won't be surprised at all if that game gets ugly. I hope Vandy keeps it close for an entertainment side of things. And they definitely have the pieces to do it. But going into the swamp and playing a team that's angry, looking for a bounce back win, not a good recipe for success. But moving over to the Big Ten on Tuesday night, we got a couple of games to highlight here in that league. Purdue at Iowa tomorrow, Blake. Who do you got in that matchup? This is a road environment spot for Purdue, so you never know what happens when you go on the road in conference play. I think Purdue gets it done here. Iowa's not a bad team by any means, but they're not going to blow you away either. So I'll take Purdue here. I think they get it done comfortably, but what say you?
I'm gonna have to second that. I think Purdue pulls it off. I don't think they win handily though. I think it's gonna be really close, just because of I don't know. I just feel like the home court advantage will play out in some way. I don't think though Iowa will prevail in this one, but I do think they'll just keep it close most of the way. Braden Smith, I expect him to have a really big game as well, and then also TKR. I'm gonna have to see how he fares out in that one, but I think he should have a good game.
Yeah, another thing that leads to me saying that Purdue might win this one handily is the fact that Owen Freeman, he's out for the rest of the year. That news broke 6 hours ago. That finger injury, I believe it is, that he had on his right hand. He was averaging 16 and 6, looking like one of the better players in the Big Ten. Hopefully he has a quick recovery, but I think that's a huge dent on what Iowa wants to do this season, and I kind of feel like that might be a little too much for them to overcome this year, but we'll see. Maybe they prove me wrong here. Purdue did kind of throw in a stinker there against Indiana on Friday. It looked for a while like the Hoosiers were going to get it done and make us look silly for posting about Mike Woodson's hot seat on that video, but per usual in Hoosier fashion, they weren't able to get it done this year, and as has been the case for much of their games. But another team that fell over the weekend that we talked about briefly in the recap portion of this, Michigan State, previously unbeaten, and then they went down to the must bus, and now they got to go to another side of California, UCLA, taking on Mick Cronin's squad on the road tomorrow. Blake, do we think that Michigan State avoids the two-game skid in conference play here, or does UCLA find something to get this thing done?
Uh, I think State does pull this one off, but UCLA is looking like one of the hottest teams in America as well. They're 5-0 in their last 5 games with wins over like Wisconsin. I think Iowa they beat, Oregon they just beat actually, and then at USC. Those are some good resume wins. I feel like, and I think it's going to be a like head-to-head game. Like it's going to be super close, knotted all the way through. But I think Michigan State pulls this one off. I just feel like Jeremy Fears is too good of a playmaker right now for that Michigan State team. Jace Richardson off the bench. I just feel like that's dirty. Like I mean, that's like one of the best off the bench type of guys in all of college basketball. So I think he just has too much of a good performance for UCLA to overcome in this one.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of leaning that way as well. UCLA is favored in this matchup, though, I will note. Apparently, Vegas loves the Bruins here, but with how great Michigan State was playing up until Saturday, I feel like they're due for a bounce back spot here. Jeremy Fears, you mentioned, obviously, amazing talent. Jaden Atkins, Trey Holloman, Cohen Carr. That team is very solid overall, well constructed, and they were undefeated in Big Ten play up until USC for a reason. So I think they're going to find themselves again here in a road spot. And another team that needs to find themselves in a road spot, the Indiana Hoosiers. They go to Wisconsin tomorrow night. I'm just going to go ahead and get out in front of it now. Indiana's not going to be able to get it done in this spot, in my opinion. John Tonji for Wisconsin. He's just too good. This Wisconsin team, they're humming offensively right now. They're having a really good overall season, sitting at 17-5, 7-4 in the Big Ten right now. But I just think that this Wisconsin team is going to be too high powered to have any kind of scare here from an Indiana team that's really been in disarray all season long.
Yeah, I'll just say it really simply. Wisconsin's gonna win by like 10 plus, and I feel like Umar Bala will have a good performance for IU, but yet again, it's gonna be too much for the Hoosiers to win in this one. Uh, and yeah, this Hoosiers team program in general sucks right now, and I feel bad for IU fans sitting here today that are depressed because their coach sucks and wanting to see like a guy like Bruce Pearl be their coach. But okay, not to get off an or continue getting off a tangent, but yeah, I think IU loses this one.
Yeah, that's definitely not a hot take with the way this season's been rolling. Indiana hasn't really blown anybody away by any means. So that recaps what's going on Tuesday. We got a couple of games on Wednesday and Friday to note real quick before we get out. A battle of two of the best teams in the SEC on Wednesday, Missouri. They're going to Tennessee. This is a very intriguing matchup because Missouri, they've been one of the surprise teams in the conference over there. Tennessee, they've kind of been inconsistent throughout SEC play so far. Haven't been bad by any means, but they also haven't been dominant like they were at one point in the non-conference. They do have the home court advantage on their side here, but Caleb Grill and Tamar Bates, man, they have been lighting it up for Missouri this year and what's been a revival year for them after the disaster of the previous season. I'm very close to predicting a Missouri win here on a tough environment, Blake. I don't know about you. I'll get your thoughts first while I kind of mull this over. But
I am gonna be the one to say Missouri pulls this one off. I just feel like they're due for another big win. They went on the road at Mississippi State, won really handily, and I think they can pull this one off against a Tennessee team who's kind of been inconsistent from the field, shooting wise, in the conference so far. They also had that win against Ole Miss at Missouri, and then they also went on the road a few weeks ago to Florida and won that one. So this is a team that's humming on all cylinders right now. And I just feel like guys like Caleb Grill, Mark Mitchell, guys like that, Ant Robinson, I just feel like that core is just going to be way too much for I blanked out for
Tennessee,
Tennessee to win. Yeah.
yeah, I'm definitely kind of on board here with that. And yeah, I think I'm going to go with Missouri in this one. Dennis Gates, we need to talk about him too. He's not getting enough love for the job that he's done. I think he's up there at the top of the SEC when it comes to SEC Coach of the Year conversations. And Caleb Grill, I mean, he's been phenomenal. I did not see him having this kind of year that he's had, but he's definitely stepped up in a big way for them. Tamar Bates, he's been solid as well. Guys like Mark Mitchell. I think that if they can get their offense rolling the way that it has been, it's going to be too much for Tennessee to overcome because there's a lot of questions when it comes to Tennessee's offense. Now, mind you, they look pretty solid on Saturday, but they also were really throwing Florida off with their defense. The biggest question is just going to be if Missouri's able to unlock that Tennessee defense that's been so stout all season long. And I think they've got the ability to do it when you've got a guy like Caleb Grill that can pull up from just about anywhere and drain it. And And then you got Tamar Bates as well. Like I mentioned, I'm a big fan of his game. There's a lot to like on that Missouri team, and I did not expect them to be at the top of the league sitting here at the start of February, up there in that 3 or 4 slot where they stand right now. And kudos to Dennis Gates. He's done a hell of a job. But also on Wednesday, Oregon, they just came off a loss yesterday, disappointing one to Nebraska. Oregon's kind of trending in the wrong direction here, Blake. They haven't looked very solid as of recently. And then Michigan, they're kind of back on the come up. They've found their way back into the rankings here. They've got Oregon in a road spot. Do we think the Wolverines, Danny Wolf, Vlad Golden, and all those guys, they get it done here?
Yeah. My bad, I'm tired. Yeah. I sold all my Oregon stock last week. They're just not a good team anymore. Michigan, like you said, they're back on the rise. And I do just feel like Danny Wolf is too much of a specimen for Oregon to handle. Nathan Brittle, he's been a decent player all year for Oregon, but he's not really someone that's going to completely stop Danny Wolf and just at Twin Towers in general. They're Golden, I think his last name is Vlad
Vlad Golden.
Gold. Yeah. I just feel like they're not gonna have really anything to stop that duo.
Yeah, I'm going with Michigan here. Oregon's lost 3 straight now. I don't think that they're going to have an answer for Wolf and Golden in the front court. And then Trey Donaldson and Amari Burnett, they've been very solid in the backcourt as well. A lot to like with this Michigan team, excuse me. I think that they're definitely trending upwards at the right time. And Friday, one of the matchups I'm most excited for as well, the Big East. They've got a lot of matchups this week that I'm looking forward to. St. John's at UConn. St. John's, obviously, we talked about their matchup coming up against Marquette on Tuesday. I'm going with St. John's in that one. I don't know if I'm going to pick them to do the week sweep here against UConn as well. And yeah, this is an interesting spot here with UConn at home. Blake, do you think the Huskies are going to take care of business here? Or does Rick Pitino go in there and get one done?
I think UConn pulls it off. I didn't really talk about it when I talked about the St. John's Marquette game, but St. John's, it's hard to really get a full grab of like what kind of team they are because they really haven't been they haven't been tested a ton. I feel like against good teams, like they played Baylor early in the season, and I think that is the best team they faced all year because Baylor was ranked at that time. And besides that, I don't think they've really faced a ranked team yet.
They
And
lost
that
to
Baylor
Georgia
game,
at one point in the
yeah, they did
non-conference.
when Georgia was hot at that time. So this is really a team that's hard to get like a full grab on. And I just don't think they have enough to be able to handle the Hurley Magic in this one at Stores.
I bet against Dan Hurley last week, and I will not be doing it again. Simple as that. He made the whole country look silly when they all picked Marquette. I think they get it done here. Not really any indication as to whether McNeely will be back in this one. I guess it's possible as we continue to creep towards that timeline where he's supposed to be back. But I think that Dan Hurley's going to get one done here in his home court. UConn's also going to have rest from Saturday all the way to Friday. They don't have a midweek game, whereas St. John's is going to be coming off a huge test on Tuesday against Marquette, and I think that could play a factor into this game as well. But Caravan and Solo Ball, I think they're going to take care of their work there at home, and this could be a very interesting shakeup of the Big Ten standings when we get back to this at the week recap next week. We could be looking at a whole different thing. UConn, they're 8-3 right now. Marquette 9-2, tied with Creighton for that second spot, and then St. John sits alone at 10-1. We could see a whole different standings by the time next week comes around. But Blake, we got a huge week to come. I'm sure we're going to be having plenty more content as the week goes on. A lot to be excited about this time of year. As we always say, we're creeping closer and closer to March, and we're going to enjoy this Kansas-Iowa State game tonight. I'm sure that's going to be a thriller. I can't wait for that one. But for now, Luke Tackett, Blake Smith, signing out. Full Court Trap Pod in the books.